Good afternoon and welcome to the Caesars Superdome. I'm Zach Ewing for NOLA.com. This is the Saints Insider Postgame Show. The New Orleans Saints have defeated the Chicago Bears 24-17 today, and that game wrapped up about 20 minutes ago here at the Dome. The Saints improved to 5-4 on the season. They have a winning record for the latest point in 2 years, winning record for the latest point in Dennis Allen's career as a head coach, and they are in first place. Not only did they get the win over the Bears, but last-second touchdowns or last-minute touchdowns given up by both the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so the Saints at 5-4 are all alone in first place in the NFC South. We'll talk about all of that. The game that was pretty ugly at times, but a victory nonetheless for the Saints. Take your comments and questions and get visits from the locker room from our NOLA.com team. That's what we have in store for you on the Saints Insider Postgame Show, which is sponsored by Tulane Doctors. When it comes to healthcare, choose a partner that sets the standard. Tulane Doctors are bringing the medicine of tomorrow to the Gulf South today. Find your physician at TulaneDoctors.com. Saints win it 24-17 here at the Dome. Really a kind of a back-and-forth game. Each team got a couple of touchdowns early, and then the scoring slowed down late. But the Saints do get it done. They get what is eventually the game-winning touchdown from Taysom Hill passing to Juwan Johnson. A little tight end to tight end action for you there. And then they really just held on. Defense forced 5 turnovers, including 3 in the fourth quarter. Every time the Bears got the ball with a chance to tie, they turned it over. And I think they had 1 punt in there too. The Bears got the ball 4 times with a chance to tie this game. Saints offense could not put it away, but the Bears offense never really had a chance. After a pretty poor first half, I have to say, by the Saints defense, they really turned things around, end up with 5 turnovers. Paulson Adebo forced 3 of those turnovers all by himself, and the Saints get the victory 24-17 over the Chicago Bears, improve to 5-4. Falcons lose at home to the Minnesota Vikings. Buccaneers lose on the road to the Houston Texans. The Saints are all alone in first place at 5-4. So let us know what you think. Let us know your comments and questions, and we will get rolling here on the Saints Insider Postgame Show. Derek Carr throws for 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did not throw for 300 yards, snaps a streak of 3 straight games with 300 yards passing. But he does have a pretty efficient day. Saints got really very conservative there in the fourth quarter with the lead. I think Dennis Allen, aware that his defense was unlikely to give anything up, they actually went for it on 4th and 1, passed up a short field goal and got stuffed, then chose a long field goal in the next drive. Blake Grupe hit the upright on the goalpost behind me, and so the Saints could never quite get that 2-score lead. And for those of you who may have bet on the game, could never quite cover that 8.5, 9-point spread. But they do eventually get the win 24-17. We got a comment here, group ain't it. I mean, look, he did hit a 55-yarder. If you haven't released the guy yet, you're not releasing him for doinking one from 48 yards or 47 yards, whatever it was. I do think there's some concern there, but I think the Saints are willing to ride it out with Blake Grupe right now, thinking that he's been good on kickoffs. He's gotten them consistently into the end zone. He has made some long ones. Just need a little more consistency on those field goals. On the other side, the Bears, of course, the 5 turnovers, they fall to 2 and 7, and really just I don't know what you can say for the Bears other than they've got a great chance at getting 2 top 5 picks between their own pick and the Carolina Panthers pick. Panthers traded that pick to the Bears for the number 1 pick last year. So Saints win it. Taysom Hill did a little bit of everything. We mentioned he threw for that touchdown pass. He also caught a touchdown pass, one of the 2 thrown by Derek Carr. He did not run for one. Taysom Hill nearly ran for one at the end of the game, but they knelt on the ball inside the 10-yard line. Had he run for a touchdown, he would have been just the 4th player in NFL history to run, throw, and catch a touchdown pass all in the same game. Walter Payton, David Patton, of all people, and LaDainian Tomlinson, the only other 3 who did that. So Taysom just short of that feat, but he was big, ran for 55 yards, caught the touchdown pass, threw for another one. So a pretty good day for Taysom Hill. Much more to come on the Saints Insider Postgame Show here live from the Superdome. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Jim Derry, the sports betting writer at NOLA.com, and then we'll also get visits from the locker room. Jeff Duncan, Luke Johnson, and the whole crew coming out to visit with me in just a little while. Keep your comments and questions coming. We will get to them right after this on the Saints Insider Postgame Show, brought to you by Tulane Doctors.
We are Tulane doctors. Physicians and scientists working side by side to advance academic medicine. We give our community access to the best possible medical remedies, developing state-of-the-art treatments to improve quality of life, address public health crises, and cure disease. All in passionate pursuit of our mission to provide inspired patient care for generations to come. Tulane doctors. The future of medicine is here.
Welcome back to the Saints Insider Postgame Show live from the Caesars Superdome. Zach Ewing with you on the Superdome floor. My first guest, Jim Derry, the sports betting writer at NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Jim, we had a gambling game on our hands today. The Saints doink a field goal that would have given them the cover. Then they kneel inside the 10-yard line, nearly scored a touchdown. If you bet on the Saints, it was a frustrating one.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one's worse. If you get the doink to not cover or you get the backdoor cover, that's meaningless. Both of them are bad. If you bet on the Saints, if you bet on the Bears, but the Saints to win, then you had a good day.
Yeah, Bears plus, 8.5 plus 9 comes through.
Ended up plus 9. It ended up 9.5 right before game time.
9.5. Okay, so that field goal would have flipped it. Very strange. We had something about the Chicago Bears and doinks, because Cairo Santos, the former Tulane kicker, doinked one off the right upright in the first half, and then Blake Grupe, same goalpost, the one right behind us, doinked it off the left upright in the second half. I don't know that I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, I've seen a double doink, but usually it's by the same team. The Bears know a lot about double doinks, especially in the playoffs.
Well, and the Saints had one last year in London as well.
Oh,
yeah.
But, yeah, it was a strange game, Zach, and, I'm not sure at this point whether you're happy you got the victory if you're a Saints fan. Do you feel better about this team today than you felt about them 4 hours ago? I'm not so sure.
No, you don't apologize for victories in the NFL.
No, of course
not. They're all hard to get. I don't care who you're playing. So you take this one and you move on. But I'm with you. It was an ugly win. Defense forced 5 turnovers. How much of that is this is just an opportunistic defense? I think that's part of it. I think they have been this year. And how much of it is just Tyson Bagent, inexperienced, did some good things today, but also forced some things and kind of made that aspect of it easy for the Saints?
A little of both. And I will say this, though, whatever adjustments they made at halftime clearly were the right ones. And they had to have made adjustments, because I thought the defense was just shy of really bad. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to go as far as say awful or atrocious, but they were not good in the first half. And they turned things around. Again, you forced Bagent into doing some things that he probably didn't want to do. But you got the turnovers. You made them happen. And when you had a chance to get them, you did do it. And look, I thought another solid performance by the offense. Not great, not as good as last week, but I thought Derek Carr was extremely efficient, and just goes to show, Pete Carmichael, for the love of God, you got Taysom Hill. It doesn't matter if they know you're going to do it. Just do it. Yeah. And they did it again 18-1 when he carries more than 8 times.
Yeah. And to that point, we just got a comment, why no Taysom Hill in the 4th and inches? It's a good question.
Extremely good question.
Some curious coaching decisions in this one, to say the least.
I actually got stopped on the way to coming right here by someone who vaguely knows me and says, I want you to talk about that on Datitude tomorrow. I want you to talk about 4th and inches. Look, we don't want to talk about all negatives and when the Saints win the football game, but it just goes to show sometimes this offensive coaching staff has a lapse in judgment. But that being said, it's certainly better than what we saw through the first 6 games of the season. The last 3 games, or at least the last 2.5, have been much better. They have relied on Taysom Hill. They have let Derek Carr kind of do his own thing a little bit. And I thought Derek Carr was efficient. Not great, but efficient for sure.
Yeah, I have to look up the exact number. Maybe Zoe can find it for us. But you talk about defensive adjustments. The big adjustment for me was they stopped the Bears running game. The Bears finished with 156 yards rushing. And I need Zoe to check how many of those were in the first half, because I think almost all of them.
I'd say 85 to 90%.
Yeah, almost. It might even be more than that. I think they had 140 some yards rushing at halftime, which means they had less. Well,
the worst part was Bagent had 62 yards at halftime,
and so they shut that down.
Yeah, he's not Justin Fields.
No,
it just goes to show that this team is going to be. And again, I'm trying to stay away from the negative here. The Saints won. They did what they had to do. They played a very good second half. But it just goes to show if the Saints play a team with a mobile, athletic quarterback, they're going to be in a whole world of hurt. That's not necessarily what you get next week in Josh Dobbs, although Josh Dobbs did what he needed to today, for sure.
But on that point, Jim, I mentioned this at the top of the show, but as sort of shaky as the Saints were at times today, their odds to make the playoffs and to win the NFC South went way up in the last hour, way up.
Well, I mean, one of the things we talked about on Bayou Bets both Monday and Thursday was if you wanted to grab the Saints at a good value, they started last week at plus 140 to win the division. It was down to plus 110 by the time we did the show Thursday. And I would imagine, I mean, with Tampa Bay losing at the end of the game there and Atlanta losing, I mean, I'm just guessing, but I'm thinking the Saints are probably going to be in the neighborhood of minus 250-ish by tomorrow. So, I mean, that train is shipped past.
I mean, I hate to say this because so many things can change with what do the Saints have? 8 games to go still. Yeah. But if they can go 2-1 in their 3 games remaining against Atlanta and Tampa Bay, split with Atlanta, beat Tampa Bay, or sweep Atlanta, however that happens, if you go 2-1, I think they win the division. I don't think it matters what happens. I mean, obviously you can't go 0-5 in the other 5 games, but you would be in really good shape given the competition.
Magic number is 9. You get to 9 wins, you're going to win the division. I would have said 10 a few weeks ago, but I think now it's 9, no matter how you look at it. So, of course, yes, you want to beat Tampa Bay, you want to beat Atlanta, but I think Tampa Bay is finding their way out of it already. Yeah. They would have won today and be 4-4. I think that would have given them some momentum, but it's really down to the Saints and the Falcons. Look, one thing that this win certainly does, and Falcons losing, is I don't think next week's any longer is it a must win. Of course you want to win. You want to go into the bye week. But if they were to lose next week and they were to be 5-5 going in the bye, you know as well as I do, you just said it, playing Atlanta is much more important than playing Minnesota. And so it gives you some wiggle room again. And if there's anything this team certainly needs is wiggle room. They need as much of it as they can get. And now they're actually in a good position.
Yeah, I mean, just a strange game. Saints fall behind 7-0. They fall behind 14-7. They goofed around with the game 17-17 for a long time. Then even once they went in the lead with the Taysom Hill to Juwan Johnson touchdown pass, they still couldn't put that game away until the last minute of the game. But, so you don't, like you said, you don't feel better about this team, but at this, you check a box, you get the 5th win, you move on.
What's frustrating is, and I go back to the play on 4th and inches or 4th and a foot or 2 feet or whatever it was. It's interesting because you're on the side usually of go for it all the time. And I'm vice versa. I'm going for the field goal. You were saying they should have kicked the field goal. Had a very good point there. You kick the field goal there. You go up by 10.
With about 7.5 minutes left.
Sure. And by no means is the game over, but you're feeling a whole lot better. But, you get the first down. You get the touchdown after the first down, and you basically put your foot on their throats. So I thought they should go for it there. But if you are going to go for it, which, again, I think is the right move, why do you make the play call there? It looked like the whole offensive line was discombobulated. I think they're lucky they didn't get a false start called against them. Although if they would have got a false start, they would have kicked the field goal. Yeah. But they should have been a flag there. There was like movement all over the place. And then you got Derek Carr. I mean, we're not using Derek Carr for the tush push. You use the guy who can give you who doesn't even need a tush push. He'll just run through you. I mean, and that's Taysom Hill. So I didn't understand that at all.
Yeah. Look, again, we're trying not to be negative. In a game the Saints won. Although I know there's some frustration from the fans. I mean, we see it in the comments. It's like it's not something that is always all good or all bad. But there are still points when you look up and you say, I'm not sure how well coached this team is.
We say at different points of the season that certain games are a microcosm of your entire season. I think that's what today was. I think they're 5-4. They were a mediocre team playing a very subpar team, and you let them hang around. You should have just destroyed them in the end, and yet you only win by 7. I mean, the Saints, every week I listen to the show, and they do what the score should have been. I don't know how they come up with this formula, but I guarantee you when I listen tomorrow, it's going to be Saints should have won that game by 15 or 17. And they won by 7. They're just fooling around. But again, this is kind of a microcosm of your entire season.
Yeah.
The coaching staff, I thought, did, for the most part, a bad job. I thought they made nice adjustments. I thought whatever they told the defense worked. But the offense, they're still making some just crazy calls, at least they realize, hey, Taysom Hill is here, and we do need to run him, and they did that when they needed to.
Yeah, Zoe says the Bears had 105 yards in the first half rushing, so I was off. They did get 51 in the second half, but most of that must have come early because at some point the Bears couldn't run, and the Saints were able to get their pass rush on. And when was the last time you saw a defensive player for the Saints have as good of a game as Paulson Adebo had today?
Been a while, and you know what? He needed one. I thought he has not played very well the last few weeks. I thought he has been part of the problem the last few weeks while the defense has kind of struggled. And he came out and he was fantastic today. I thought it was weird. We talked about it earlier that Zach Braun was in there a whole lot, especially early on. Some weird combinations with defense. I wasn't sure I understood what they were trying to do. They changed it again. They changed it at halftime to their credit. To Dennis Allen's credit, whatever they did at halftime, it put more pressure on Bajan, and he looked confused because whatever he saw in the first half, he did not see in the second half. And from the get-go, he kind of didn't know what to do. And once just goes to show a guy playing his third NFL game, once you rattled his cage a little bit, then he was off his kilter and he didn't know what to do.
And there were some tight coverage windows he was trying to throw into, and it turned into interceptions and got sacked and dropped the ball and fumbles and things like that. But I really like what you said about this being a microcosm of the Saints season because there is going to be no – let's just say hypothetically the Saints go on and win the NFC South, which they should, assuming they stay healthy, all those things. They should win this division. There will be no playoff team that has made its fans pull their hair out more than the New Orleans Saints. I mean, there are just some moments where I can just see fans going, what are you doing? You're driving me crazy. And then at the end, you end up winning the game 24-17.
It's funny you say that because we even talked about this upstairs as well. This is the least enthused I've seen a Saints crowd in many years. Certainly since at some point during those 7 and 9 years. The fans weren't in it today. For I think until maybe the third quarter, it's kind of like they were here because they felt like they didn't want to waste their season ticket money or something because they weren't cheering. They finally got a little excited in the fourth quarter and they got a little bit louder. But, man, it doesn't make any sense because like you were talking about, there was only one home game from after October 1st, and now there's this one home game, and the next one's not till December 3rd.
It's the only home game in November.
You'd think they'd be fired up today because they don't get to be here again for 4 more weeks. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense that they weren't fired up. But whatever the reason, they weren't in it until very late.
Yeah, part of that is you're playing a team you really think you should beat.
There were more Bears fans here.
Although I don't know.
There were a lot of Bears fans here today.
If you're the Saints, can you really sit and say, oh, that's a team we should beat to anybody? I mean, you can't. They struggled to beat the Carolina Panthers. They've struggled to beat the Chicago Bears. They lost to the Green Bay Packers, who are not a very good team. They lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are not a very good team.
Right. Let me bring the sports betting writer part of this into it. When we talk about spreads and lines in the beginning of the week, and you go through the week, you say, when you're looking at lines, it's an insta bet on the Bears. The Saints shouldn't be given 8.5 or 9.5 points to anyone. And so to me, this was an insta bet on the Bears. It was an easy bet on the Bears. There's no way you can bet on the Saints here. And again, to your point, they showed it.
I'm seeing some comments though that say Carmichael should be fired. Allen should be. Pete Carmichael. Look, he's answered the bell.
Not gonna happen.
He has answered the bell the last 4 or 5 weeks. Today wasn't a great offensive day. I think they got real conservative, but I think he's doing a lot of the things that everyone was saying he should be. You saw more play action. You've seen more Taysom Hill.
Agree.
The red zone has gotten better. I mean, if you're going to fire Pete Carmichael, the time was a month ago, not now.
Well, at the time was after the Jacksonville game when you had 10 days off and you could make something happen. If they didn't do it then, they're not going to do it now. You're not going to go, even if they lose next week, you're not going to do it after you win 2 out of 3 games. And to your point, I agree 100%. I don't think by any means the offense has been efficient coaching-wise, but it has been a heck of a lot better. And it has been, ever since they talked about, I hate using these words because it sounds the wrong way. I don't mean it to sound this way, but dumbing down the playbook. Basically, they yanked plays out of the playbook because I think it was too much for this young team to understand. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Derek Carr. I think it was the rest of the receiving core and whatever else. But whatever they've done, the moves they made on the offensive line, I found it very interesting that Andres Pete remained at left tackle, even with James Hurst back. Says a lot, and it worked. I thought they did a good job protecting them today.
All right, so the Saints beat the Bears 24-17. Then in the few minutes after that, the Vikings beat the Falcons 31-28, and the Houston Texans beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 39-37. I mean, just both with touchdowns in the last 20 seconds of the game. So a great day for the Saints. They go to Minnesota next week, then have the bye, then go to Atlanta. That's the rest of this month. What is your prognosis for this team? I mean, I actually think, despite all the ups and downs and the roller coaster, and they're right about where you expected them to be at this point in the season.
I think from a bettor's perspective, this is actually a really good spot for the Saints next week. You're talking about a Minnesota team that probably got a win they didn't deserve. Josh Dobbs didn't have any time to think about anything. He just had to run out on the field. So instead of like kind of watching everything from afar and them having a whole week to prepare, coming off of a loss and them feeling like they have to win the game, they probably feel like they stole one today. I think it's going to be a lot looser in Minnesota this week, whereas the Saints realize, hey, we have a chance to do something we haven't done in the Dennis Allen era, and that's win 3 games in a row. If I had to guess, I'm guessing the Saints are going to be a slight favorite. I think the Saints are in a good spot right now and going into next week, and I actually like their chances to win in Minnesota.
All right, so Saints 5-4. They beat the Bears 24-17. You're watching the Saints Insider Postgame Show. It's brought to you by Tulane Doctors. That's Jim Derry, sports betting writer at NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, and also the host of the Datitude podcast, which you can find, 3 times a week during the season, right?
3 times a week.
3
Monday,
times a week
Thursday,
during
and
the
Friday.
season. Check it out. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, all that good stuff. So, Jim, appreciate you joining us, and we will be back on the Saints Insider Postgame Show in just a few minutes. We'll be joined by Luke Johnson, Jeff Duncan, Matt Paris, Rod Walker, the whole crew covering the Saints. They'll be coming out from the Saints locker room, plus more of your questions and comments right after this.
We are Tulane Doctors. Physicians and scientists working side by side to advance academic medicine. We give our community access to the best possible medical remedies, developing state-of-the-art treatments to improve quality of life, address public health crises, and cure disease. All in passionate pursuit of our mission to provide inspired patient care for generations to come. Tulane Doctors. The future of medicine is here.
The Times-Picayune always gets it right. Jay's on top.
Not quite. It says here the Crusaders are the best.
I think you mean the Greenies, buddy.
These sports writers know what's up.
At least you're wearing the right colors, but we know why people read the paper. The one thing we can all agree on, we trust the Times-Picayune.
Subscribe today. Read it today. Trust it today. The Times-Picayune.
You're never gonna make the front page wearing that.
Welcome back to the Saints Insider Postgame Show, live from the Caesars Superdome. I'm Zach Ewing. The Saints beat the Bears 24-17 today. We are awaiting our crew from the locker room. We'll have quick visits with our beat writers, Luke Johnson and Matthew Paris. Also our columnists, Rod Walker and Jeff Duncan. Our thanks to Jim Derry for stopping by. And we'll just keep rolling on here. Drop your comments and questions into the chat, and we'll get to those as much as we can. We'll go through the scoring summary and some stats here. In the meantime, scoring opened at 11:21 of the first quarter. Cole Kmet, an 18-yard touchdown pass from Tyson Bagent. And that was a beautiful pass, a little floater into the right corner of the end zone. Bears take their opening possession and score a touchdown to go up 7-0. Took the Saints a couple of drives to answer, but they did so at the 44-second mark of the first quarter. Tied the game 7-7. Chris Olave, an 8-yard touchdown catch from Derek Carr right at the goal line, fell into the end zone, and it was good to see Chris Olave kind of get out of what he kind of self-described as a slump. He had a touchdown today to tie that game at 7. But Bears go right back up at 12:52 of the second quarter. Again, it was Cole Kmet catching the 9-yard touchdown pass from Tyson Bagent, made it 14-7 Bears. The Saints answer at 6:05 of the second quarter. Taysom Hill catching a 2-yard touchdown pass from Derek Carr, tied the game on Blake Grupe's extra point. It was 14-14. Saints took the opening possession of the second half and took a 17-14 lead on Blake Grupe's career-long 55-yard field goal. And I got to say, I know there was a comment earlier that Grupe's not it. That thing was good from 60. It was pretty easily good from 55 yards. I know he missed the 47-yarder that could have iced the game in the fourth quarter. I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but I am saying I see the potential the Saints see in Blake Grupe. And I just think they're going to ride with him. I think if he's still missing kicks like that a year from now, 2 years from now, then yeah, you cut bait. But he's a rookie. He's just out of college. The consistency issues, you hope you'll get past. But you don't trade Will Lutz in training camp if you're not willing to stick with Blake Grupe. There's a lot of kickers around the league, who struggled in their first year or two, and then somebody else picked them up, and they turned into like Hall of Fame type kickers. So you got to give Blake Grupe time. I'm not saying he's going to turn into a Hall of Famer. Give him some time. He hits the 55-yarder, gives the Saints a 17-14 lead. Cairo Santos ties it up for the Bears at the 3:27 mark of the third quarter, 17-17. And then the last score of the day came at 11:05 in the fourth quarter. That was Juwan Johnson, a 3-yard touchdown catch from Taysom Hill, tight end to tight end. If you can really classify Taysom Hill as anything, I guess he's technically listed as a quarterback, but he's a little bit of everything. So that is the final score, 24-17. Saints force 5 turnovers. Paulson Adebo, 2 interceptions, also a forced fumble and fumble recovery. He also had 7 tackles. Demario Davis got a forced fumble that was picked up by Pete Werner later in the fourth quarter, and then also Marcus May in on the action with a diving interception. So 5 turnovers forced by the Saints defense. Derek Carr finishes 25 of 34 for 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not a lot downfield today. That's one thing that was different from what we've seen the last few weeks. He did have the 2 touchdowns. Let's see if we can get what his long pass was of the day. His long was just 14 yards to Taysom Hill. So that, strange day. A lot of underneath passing. He did go long once to Olave on the first drive, I think, and it was incomplete. But he took what was given. He finishes 25 of 34 for 211 yards, the 2 touchdowns, a 109 rating. And Taysom Hill, of course, 1 of 1 passing for 3 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, you mentioned Olave had the touchdown, 6 catches for 46 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets. Alvin Kamara, 4 catches for 44 yards on 5 targets. Kendry Miller had 31 yards receiving on 1 catch. Juwan Johnson, 5 catches for 29 yards and a touchdown. His most productive day of the year by far. Foster Moreau, a 23-yard catch. And so I take it back. 14 yards was not the long reception. 31 by Kendry Miller, 23 to Foster Moreau. But both of those were kind of catch and run. They really didn't go downfield. Rashid Shaheed, 3 catches, 22 yards. Taysom Hill, 4 catches, 13 yards, and a touchdown. And Jamal Williams, 2 catches for 6 yards. Excuse me. Got a comment. Did somebody put Michael Thomas in the witness protection program? He had 1 target, no catches. He did draw a defensive holding call in the fourth quarter. He was in the game quite a bit. Michael Thomas was blocking his tail off today. And you got to give him credit for that, too. I mean, look, the guy's got an incentive-laden contract where he doesn't make a whole lot of money this year unless he hits certain benchmarks, right? And he was put in a locker today, didn't have any catches, but he was still fighting. He was still blocking. He was still doing a lot. So that is the extent of it. Leading rusher for the Saints was Taysom Hill, 11 carries, 52 yards. Alvin Kamara, 26 yards on 9 carries. And now we've got our guys from the locker room here on the Saints Insider Postgame Show. We will bring on Luke Johnson, Saints beat writer for the Times-Picayune. We won't take a break here. We're just going to stick with you. Luke, fresh from the locker room. Saints win it 24-17. Just kind of going through the stats. It's a weird game.
Yeah, it was an incredibly weird game. Like, I was trying to get my game story done before the end of the game. I'm like, I don't know what to even lead with here. Like, they played horrible on defense for 3 quarters. They were amazing on defense in the fourth quarter. They played pretty good on offense in the first half. They played terrible on offense in the fourth quarter. Weird game to try to process. The important part is they get the win. They're through 9 weeks of the season. They're in first place in the NFC South. I don't know if we would have expected saying that after some of the losses early in the season. So, all that really matters is you get it done in this league, and they got it done today.
Yeah, you don't apologize for wins in the NFL.
Not even close.
5 takeaways by this defense, 3 in the fourth quarter. For as shaky as they were early, it seemed like the Bears could have 50 drives and wouldn't have scored in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, it was such a weird close to that game because the Bears looked unstoppable. And it wasn't even that they were doing anything super special. Like, they weren't hitting on all these big plays. It was just they had guys running wide open on every single play. they made Tyson Bagent look like a Pro Bowler today, making his 3rd career start. But then in the 4th quarter, man, I mean, they just turned it on, and it was everything. Brian Brzee, I think, made probably the play of the game that won't get talked about with all the with the turnovers and everything. He bats down a pass on 3rd and I think 7 or 3rd and 6. Bears had a wide open receiver running on 3rd down. If they convert that, maybe they can start getting something going. That was a huge play. And then, obviously, like Paulson Adebo, he's putting together a really solid season. But today, I mean, he looked like an all-pro.
Yeah.
2 interceptions. It's the 2nd time he's come with that kind of top-down punch to force a fumble in the last couple of weeks. They've got themselves a really good player. And I remember talking back in early training camp when he was competing with Alontae Taylor for that starting outside corner job. A lot of people wanted to see Alontae out there. I think Paulson is showing why they had so much faith in him.
Yeah. Apologies for the kind of the chaos in the background. Deuce McAllister's here, and everybody wants a photo with Deuce. So, I mean, who doesn't?
I want a photo with Deuce.
Who doesn't want a photo with Deuce?
We'll try to get one later after this.
That's the cause for the commotion behind us. Did the defense, either Dennis Allen or some of the defenders, mention any adjustments they made, or was it just executing better?
I think they had just played better. They just boiled down to that. I think they made the plays that were there to be made, which is something they consistently didn't do through the first 3 quarters. I'm still not sold on them. Right, their pass rush has just completely evaporated. They've had to kind of resort to sending a little bit more blitzes than they would like to do. But I mean, for much of this game, it looked like they were playing with 9 or 10 defenders on the field, and they figured it out in the 4th quarter, and they needed to. Obviously, I mean, it's not very often you win the turnover margin 5-0 and you win a game by 7 points.
Yeah, I mean, if you had told me before the game the Saints win the turnover battle 5-0. You're thinking this could get
like 45-0. Yeah.
I mean, the Bears are not very good to begin with. So kind of shaky. Again, you don't apologize for wins, but the Saints get it. On the other side of the ball, efficient day for Derek Carr. Not a great day, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. We continue to see the increased level of involvement for Taysom.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. I think today, now after today's game, I think they're 18-1 when he has 7 carries or more. And they kind of continue to sprinkle in some passing plays for him, which I like. He had the touchdown pass to Juwan Johnson today. There was a joke afterwards in the locker room that Colin Saunders is like, I absolutely set that up. He said the Bears had 3 guys on me when I went out on the route, and that's why
like
Juwan Johnson was
he
was the first read.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this is like one of those things that like we saw that them running that play in practice, and we can't report on that sort of stuff before the game for obvious reasons, but the Bears were ready for it anyways. They were just maybe a little bit too ready for it. And they left Juwan Johnson completely uncovered in the end zone. So give an assist to Colin Saunders, Bink Saunders. He called himself Binkatron after that play because they had 3 guys on him. So that guy's a delight to talk to. He's a lot of fun.
The decoy, Bink the decoy. So Saints 5-4 go to Minnesota next week. They can kind of, normally you'd say, hey, you got Atlanta after that. That's the more important game. But with the bye week in between, you can really emphasize getting both of those and getting greedy at this point.
I think we saw it today. Again, the Saints team can't take anybody for granted. Chicago's not a very good football team. They played a great game today, though, against the Saints team. With Tyson Bagent at the helm, they're going to go up against another backup quarterback next week. It looks like probably Josh Dobbs, who threw a game winner against Atlanta today. And I think anybody who's watched the Saints defense play anybody ever is probably a little bit worried about Josh Dobbs running all over against Tyson Bagent. Had I think 70 yards rushing today, which I did not forecast before today's game.
I believe in sportsbook circles his over under was 13.5. So
yeah, well, he went way over.
The over was good. All right, so an assist to Josh Dobbs today. Saints fans can thank him and then hope he falls flat on his face in Minneapolis next week. Luke Johnson, beat writer for the Times-Picayune, NOLA.com. Thanks for joining us on the Saints Insider. And we will let you make the handoff for the Saints Insider postgame debut of Matthew Paris.
Zone read here?
Yeah. Get the handoff. This is Matthew Paris. He's also the best dressed beat writer that we've ever had, I think. Scoot in just one half step closer for me, Matt. Sure. And tell us about the Saints locker room after this one. Were they in jovial spirits, or did they feel like they kind of got away with one here?
A bit of both. I was in Cam Jordan's press conference, and he was jovial like himself, made jokes here and there, but also was a bit frustrated with how the defense performed. When you have 5 turnovers, but the yardage that Chicago had, it wasn't their prettiest day. And same thing for the offense. James Hurst said when you have 5 turnovers, you expect it to be a 3-4 score game, and yet they only won by 7. So some things to clearly improve on, but they'll take the victory regardless.
You had mentioned during the Saints Insider podcast earlier this week that you had been in the Dome only once before, correct? Yeah. What did you think of the atmosphere today? It seemed a little subdued. There were a lot of Bears fans here. Like it just feels like this fan base, this is their only home game in the month of November, but it just doesn't seem like they've fully embraced this team. They're still unsure.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty strong to start. People were fired up, ready for their return after it being a month. But then once it started, the Bears having success, it got quiet in here at some points. And then even when halftime, they weren't in a great position with 22 seconds left to make a drive and go down the field. But when they just still didn't get points, there were some boos at the end of the half. So it was a little bit subdued at times. And I think there was some frustration that they couldn't move the ball better.
All right. So for those who don't know, the way we do this is one of our beat writers writes the game story, kind of the straight recap of what happens. Today, that's Luke. So it's your job to go seek out another storyline. I have a feeling what you might have sought out, but tell us what you.
Yeah, I'll be doing a Paulson Adebo career to take the easy one on the first sidebar story here. But he had 2 picks, was in really great position for each of them, and then also had that forced fumble as well. So I think he's probably going to get NFC Defensive Player of the Week. But he was the first Saints player to have 2 interceptions since 2018 . So quite a feat there.
And I'll bet that didn't include a forced fumble in 2018.
Right. Yeah, I need to look that up after we're done here.
Pretty incredible. I mean, you don't see days like that too often. It was a strange day for the defense, but going all the way back to training camp, this group talked about being more opportunistic, getting more takeaways, putting games away that way. And so they have to be pleased with that.
Yeah, and look, they put the offense in pretty good field position. This could have been, more of a route if, you convert on some of those turnovers. So I do think they did it. I think if you're looking for things to maybe worry about if you're the Saints defense is the explosive plays at the beginning of the game. They harped all week that they needed to start faster. They didn't. That's still an issue that they'll have to correct. And then the explosive plays, there's just too many kind of breakdowns, especially when it comes to mobile quarterbacks. Bajent rushed for over 60 yards today. Was averaging 10 yards a carry at one point. And it needs to get better for sure.
Saints go to Minnesota next week before the bye. Same question I asked Luke. I mean, if you're the Saints, it's the point where you start to get greedy here and try to build that cushion.
Yeah, and I think the Vikings did them a favor today. The Falcons look like they're in a bit of a mess, especially with we didn't watch the game, but following it on Twitter, it seemed like their running game hasn't really been what you would expect a Falcons rushing team to be. So it seems like they're clearly dealing with some weaknesses, and next week's game, it may be some opportunity there to create some breathing room in the division.
He's Matthew Paris, new beat writer for the New Orleans Saints for the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. Matt, thanks for joining us, and we'll be right back on the Saints Insider Postgame. Jeff Duncan and Rod Walker joining the show next. Get your comments and questions in for them, and we'll be right back after this word from Tulane Doctors.
We are Tulane Doctors. Physicians and scientists working side by side to advance academic medicine. We give our community access to the best possible medical remedies, developing state-of-the-art treatments to improve quality of life, address public health crises, and cure disease. All in passionate pursuit of our mission to provide inspired patient care for generations to come. Tulane Doctors. The future of medicine is here.
The Times-Picayune always gets
Never. Welcome back to the Saints Insider Postgame Show here at the Caesars Superdome. Zach Ewing along with Rod Walker, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com columnist. Saints beat the Bears 24-17 today. Rod, one of those weird games, as we mentioned with the other guys, you win the turnover battle 5-0. You expect this to be like a 30, 40-point win. Saints got the job done. Still a lot of question marks.
Yeah, and you talk about the turnovers, but there's also the Saints committed one penalty the whole game.
It was a Jawan Johnson false start. And they had to hang on for dear life to win this game. So, but I mean, it's NFL. You get a win, you move on to the next week. But I think there was a lot of things that's still concerning because this is a Bears team that was 2-6. This wasn't, the 49ers or the Eagles coming in here. This is the Chicago Bears, a team that, I predicted this game to go 31-13, and this game came down to the very end pretty much.
Somebody picked 23-17. I'm not going to say who, but check out the Saints Insider Postgame Show for Friday. It was me. Look, you're right. And a few weeks ago, they lose to the Texans or the Jaguars or the Packers, and we sit here and say, well, they did all these things right, but they just made a few too many mistakes and they're close. So it's hard to go to the other side of that and pick on them in a win and say, well, they should have done this and that. They did enough to get the win. You don't apologize for wins. And I think that's no turnovers, one penalty. They played a very clean game, and it allowed them to get a win on a day when a lot of teams would not have.
And I think that goes back to this offense, though. I mean, during the second half of this game, I think they looked a lot like the offense that we've seen the struggles with. They can't score. You got close to the end zone and couldn't score. Blake Griffin misses a field goal. I mean, they just did a lot of the little things that that sort of hurt them throughout this season, and it almost came back to bite them, but it didn't. I mean, the defense ended up stepping up at the end, and which is kind of what they've been doing anyway. I mean, they started off slow. Today's slow start lingered on a little bit longer than it normally does, and as a result of that, this game was close throughout.
You don't see too many games like Paulson Adebo had today. I mean, that was an all-timer.
Yeah, I don't know what else is going on around the league today, but I'd be shocked if he's not the NFC Defensive Player of the Week. I mean, he was the 2 interceptions and him punching the ball out and recovering the fumble. I mean, he had a really good game. And, after the game, he talked about some things that I guess you have to watch the film to see. But, there were some things he felt like he didn't do right. But, he did some things right that really kind of won this game for this team, I feel like.
Sometimes football is won by big plays. He made the big plays. So the other stuff you can kind of get away with. Did have a question. How would you rate the offensive line today?
I thought they did well. I mean, this is the first game all season Derek Carr did not get sacked. I mean, he did get pressure some. Derek Carr actually talked about that. There's sometimes he throws it away to avoid sacks, so that obviously helps. But I think Andrews Pete, playing left tackle, this is his third straight game doing it, and the offense has played better. I mean, we're not talking about them nearly as much as we used to. The running game never got going really today, so I mean that falls back on the offensive line, I would say. But I mean, I think for the most part they were solid.
Saints go to Minnesota next week before their bye week in week 11. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it was Jim who called this a microcosm of the season for them. And you just had these question marks. This is a deeply flawed team, but ultimately today they get the job done. Now the question is, can they continue to do
Yeah, I mean, this is just who this team is. But, they're on top of the NFC South right now. The Bucs lost today. The Falcons lost today. So, I mean, you can't really complain about being there, but still some work to do. To me, they still haven't played a great team. So I just don't know if we really know. I mean, I just think this is kind of an average football team that's going to win some games like today's game, and they're going to lose some games like today's game.
He's Rod Walker. You can find his latest column in a couple of hours here on NOLA.com and in Monday morning's Times-Picayune. Rod, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, man.
And we'll let you hand off to Jeff Duncan here, and he will be our final guest of the day as he makes his way over under the rope. Jeff Duncan, Times-Picayune columnist, after the Saints beat the Bears 24-17. Just been talking with the other guys, and without getting too repetitive, just a very strange game that you felt like, and the Saints could have won this thing by 40, or they could have lost it if things go differently.
Yeah, and I think, look, it's a positive sign that you win it. I mean, I know it's probably not aesthetically pleasing as Saints fans would like, but this team right now just needs to stack wins any way they can get them. I think it's encouraging that some of the changes that this coaching staff has made are working. The offensive line in particular, since they've benched Trevor Penning and gone with the veteran unit, that unit has kind of settled down things. And I think offensively now they can start to try and find some consistencies. There's not a lot of consistency on this team in any way other than the pass defense. That's the one thing I think this team can hang its hat on. Otherwise, it's just kind of a mixed bag, right? And in a league that's still wide open right now, the NFC South, obviously the Saints are in first, but the NFC in general is kind of wide open. You just get wins any way you can and then worry about, how pretty it looks later.
Yeah. And having said that, we'll nitpick here for a minute.
Sure.
A lot of the discussion this week was about slow starts on defense. And then they come out and have the slowest start of them all. They just couldn't stop the run in the first half. Tyson Bagent got away on third down over and over and over again. Well, how surprised were you the Saints were not able to patch that up against a admittedly bad team?
I just think it's human nature, Zach. I mean, everyone can read the paper or read online and see this team's 2-6 coming here with a rookie quarterback. And I know you should be more professional than that. And really good teams, would have taken care of business earlier. But it's just human nature. You're going to sleepwalk a little bit in a game like this after coming off a big road win. Now, you could hear Dennis Allen afterward. I mean, he was upset about that. He was upset with the way the defense played in the first half. I heard he had some choice words for the defense at halftime. It shouldn't come to that, especially after we've seen this a recurring theme throughout the last few games. So that's something they've got to get rectified. They're fortunate that they're playing teams that are near the bottom of the league right now, the Bears, the Colts. You can get away with that, but they're not going to have that margin for error later in the season or next week going to Minnesota, playing in a hostile environment against a team that just went on the road and beat the Falcons. I think that's going to be a difficult assignment.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Do you think there was any defensive scheme adjustment at halftime, or was it just playing better?
No, it's exactly what DA said. They just played better. He goes, we're not halftime adjustments. I don't know if people are aware of this, but they're the most overrated thing in sports. There is no halftime adjustment. You're adjusting during the game. Most of the time in the locker room, you only have like 8 minutes. Most of the guys are using a bathroom, getting a quick, banana or something to eat. There's not a lot of talk on X's and O's scheming. That's going on during the game. So really, I think maybe a few choice words from head coach, light a fire under these guys and, get them to focus in a little bit more defensively and certainly turned around at halftime.
Something I wanted to ask you, Dunk. You wrote a column before the season about how the dome field advantage needs to come back. Saints are now 2-2 at home. They're 8-12 in their last 20 home games. Just not what you have come to expect from this team. And today I felt like the crowd maybe gets into it late, but it was a little bit of a lukewarm crowd. There were a lot of Bears fans in here.
Yeah.
How concerning should that be for the Saints that they still haven't found that level of – I mean, yes, they win today, but they certainly didn't look dominant.
Yeah, I think there's a feeling, a little bit of complacency playing at home. Your family's here. You've got a lot of people in the stands. You tend to think you're invincible here, even though the record hasn't shown that. But I do think that can creep in on a team, and it feels that way when the Saints have played. They haven't had a lot of big-name opponents here. It's been a bunch of, kind of mediocre opponents, no marquee teams. So it's felt like a little bit of a lackluster environment in the dome, and that's unusual. Now, these fans here, we all know the most passionate in the NFL. They're doing their part. At some point, the Saints have to kind of show up and play with more intensity. And look, it happened down the stretch. We saw Badgett really struggling offensively to put plays together in this environment when it got really loud. I think you have to give the home crowd an assist on that.
Yeah, and this is the Saints' only home game in the month of November. As you mentioned, they go on the road to Minnesota, then the bye week, then on the road to Atlanta this Sunday after Thanksgiving, and then they're back home for 3 in a row in December. So kind of an opportunity here to build a little bit of a cushion in a division that is just falling flat on its face around them. Such an opportunity for the Saints here on this road trip over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, all the players were in the locker room watching the end of that Bucs-Texans game. I mean, the Bucs took a 4-point lead with less than a minute left and lost. So it just shows you how crazy this league is, and a lot of players were obviously happy to see that game flip the way it did late. I think the Saints don't need to apologize. They're 5-4 right now. They're far from playing their best football, but they got to start getting it together, especially offensively, especially on the run defense, because even if they are able to scrap out these wins right now, it's not going to be good enough when it matters later in the season. And I think that's why Dennis Allen, while he was obviously pleased afterward, you could sense a real sense of urgency in his voice about getting some of this stuff corrected. There's been kind of season-long flaws, season-long undercurrent of problems on this team.
Yeah, I mean, it's an old coaching cliche. We love to fix mistakes after wins rather than losses, and that's what the Saints get to do. But there's still a lot of things to fix as they kind of come to the business end of the season.
Yeah, look, they're 5-4. I mean, and they're healthy. I mean, we've talked about this. One of the healthiest teams in the league. That matters when you start getting into November and December. The Saints are starting to improve some things like penalties. They had one penalty today. So there's some things that we're seeing they're doing better. Takeaways, something that was a bugaboo a year ago, much better this season. So there is some reasons to be encouraged while they're trying to fix some of the other areas of this team. And you can see the potential there offensively. It just hasn't come together yet. But when you're healthy the way they are, that sometimes can make up for a lot of other deficiencies.
Absolutely. So Saints beat the Bears 24-17. We thank you for joining us on the Saints Insider Postgame Show. He's Jeff Duncan, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com columnist, also joined today by Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Luke Johnson. Our man behind the camera is Norman Bell, and Zoe Collins-Rath is our wizard at the keyboard producing. I'm Zach Ewing. Our thanks also to our sponsor, Tulane Doctors. Saints get to 5-4. Check us out on the regular Saints Insider podcast. We'll be back with an episode on Wednesday afternoon on these same channels. Subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a like. Follow all the coverage on NOLA.com. That's right, thumbs up. And we will see you next Sunday for a new post-game show from Saints Vikings. Until then, thanks for watching.